whatever view they had, and that creates these bubbles, so people don't see the same information. And when there's no common ground, it's much harder to have a civil discussion, which I think is what we're seeing in a lot of the world.
I think so. I was listening to Jon Stewart, and it was always very thoughtful about this Joe Rogan, people freaking out about Joe Rogan, and he's like, no one individual is all that dangerous. The algorithm that's far more dangerous. And you're right. Like it's not that any one person is going to convince you of something absolutely crazy. It's that the algorithm is going to push you in that way by feeding you the things that you are likely to believe.
And you will see 6, 7 people all believing the same thing.
Right. Pushing you more and more, even no matter how insane it is.
Yeah.
So it's not the people that we should silence, it's the algorithms we need to control.
Yes.
But algorithm is the market model.
The problem is that the algorithm is decided to basically pick out the worldviews that you like and then give you more people share the same worldviews. And that naturally tends towards extremist views.
Exactly. But silencing people, as our liberal friends would like to do, it's kind of pointless.
No, I think people need to be exposed to opposing ideas. But now we've got this point where, the opposing ideas are completely silenced in a lot of situations. And that I don't think is helpful, because if you cancel people, then you just segregate society even more. People have to be able to come to the same forum and discuss and meet each other and see each other as people and not characters, which I think is a major issue. People see opposing political parties, opposing political ideas now as characters. Everyone in that is not us. They're the enemy, they're evil, they have little redeeming qualities. And once people are placed in that camp, a proper democracy, I think, cannot function. Because if people meet each other in person, they might find that, yes, they disagree with many issues politically, but the other person is human. They have families, they have desires, they're in many ways they could be a good person, but all of that is overshadowed by this division. And this division, I think it's unstable. It drives huge wedges in society, and now it's almost irreconcilable.
So I think for that the contributions of the quantum theory or the insights from this thing is that reality is not like there is a global solution or consistent kind of logic, single viewpoint that explains everything, right? And that's even true at the bottom of the reality here. Yes. And building up in a classical system, that also happens, as Kavan said. Accepting that, and also that also relates to the notion of self that I mentioned. Even you yourself is not a coherent entity.
No.
And depending on the situation, context, you change, and that is totally okay. And we need to embrace that as a reality.
I completely agree. I think it's very dangerous to go down this ideological hole where we say that this is the truth, and anything that's not that is false, and it creates very dangerous societies. And I mean, society to be adaptable, to be open to opinions, to be open to change, has to think differently. Right. A lot of the time, I find that like this pursuit of this one truth is no different from fundamental religions. It's a very similar mentality. It's that this is the truth, and anyone who disagrees with it should be silenced. I don't think it's helpful. I mean, I would disagree with what a lot of people say, but I don't believe that they shouldn't have the right to voice those opinions or believe in different social political systems, different worldviews, different ways of measuring merit, whatever. I think it's important that those ideas not be pushed into some place where they fester and become even more extreme.
Yeah, so to sort of realize that kind of society, I mean, we talked a little bit while we are walking, up to high school, to some extent, we can accept, reluctantly, even though give an idea to the student that there is an answer to every question. But I think it's still better to reform that lower level education, that in many of the real world questions are never the case that we have an answer.
I think it's important to emphasize this, even from people who are very young, that we don't know all the answers to everything. I think a lot of people in high school actually believe, physics is answered, like we know everything.
Yeah.
But in actuality, we know very little. And there are also people believe that, we have the absolute best form of government from now on forever. And that just can't be true. It's naive to think that what we have now is the best possible social structure.
It's also dangerous the other way, right? I mean, even physicists are guilty of this, because I think a lot of people don't believe that there are absolute answers, but then they go into cultural relativism.
Yes, that's another issue as well.
That's just as dubious, right? I mean, there are some things that we can, so like, I was watching something on what does it mean to be an atheist? Am I an atheist? Well, probably not. I mean, I don't completely close myself off to the idea that there may be a God, but what's the probability that there's a God given all the evidence? Well, it's very, very, very small. It's probably like 10 to the minus 20 or something.
At least
right?
not a God that's following one of the descriptions of the major religions.
That's right. So it's not zero, but like that. But agnostic doesn't mean 50-50, right? So I mean, it's not complete relativism. It's
Bayesian.
It's Bayesian. So maybe that's what we're saying. Teach people Bayesian way of thinking, not like these absolutes or relativist ideologies. There is a middle ground that is much more grounded in reality.
It's about being grounded in reality. It's you can have absolute right answers, absolute wrong answers in certain instances. 1 + 1 is 2, despite the current lot of movements that somehow say otherwise. Of course, I have to qualify what I mean by 1 and 2, and this is the issue. Have you seen all those videos about 1 + 1 is not equal to 2?
No, what is that about?
Oh,
are they mathematics videos or are they cultural videos?
They are cultural videos. They're about how in certain instances you can't say 1 + 1 is equal to 2 because when you have two objects, organizing two objects is more than twice as hard as organizing one object, which I completely agree with, but that doesn't change math. Math is 1 + 1 is equal to 2. If adding two objects is not twice, it's because the two things are not independent from each other and there are correlations. But because they don't understand advanced mathematics.
Well, modular addition, 1 + 1 is 0.
Yeah.
Depends
on definition of object and of class and also equal as well,
have you seen one of the things is of the recent Foundations TV series, the Apple TV Foundations?
No.
I mean, the original Foundations book, I have nothing against, it's a really good book. Of course, the TV series completely changes that. Some of it's quite good, but I mean, there was one part where this supposedly brilliant mathematician goes, 1 + 1 does not necessarily have to be 2 because it could be basis, something arithmetic. Yes, of course, but this is why these things are defined, particular basis. Everyone's well understood that like this is not a profound point. Yes, 7 + 7 is not going to be 14 if you're working on basis 9, but it still mathematically represents the same object, just a different basis.
Absolutely, yeah.
But they make it sound profound and make it think, oh yeah, nothing mathematicians may have got it all wrong. It doesn't always be.
It is, that is sort of taking cultural relativism a step too far.
Yeah, but I think the solution to the cultural relativism or arbitrary relativism is that distinction between what is more reliable and what is not known, right? I mean, to the extent it's a boundary of the knowledge, that what you know and what other people know, and what you know about what other people know and what you don't know, and so on. And once you clarify that, then you can't take arbitrary relativism, right? There are certain things that within the realm of something that is coherent explanation or coherent kind of belief system, and you can respect that kind of set of the principles, and these principles itself may not be compatible with other types of belief system, but that's a sort of the view of this locally consistent but globally inconsistent kind of issues. And physics, as long as you can give an insight with that's how the reality is, I think it will have a really huge impact. And the next question I wanted to think was that whether we can do anything or we should do anything in terms of the tertiary education, university. Currently, Australian university is kind of giving a lecture and also examination as if, even at the level of the university, there's an answer to every question, right? That's my, frustration. When I give a lecture, I want to actually make all the, marks based on like a presentation or writing.
Australian universities are designed to minimize creativity in teaching.
Yeah, that's the reason. I'm bringing this, issue.
In my higher level course, I think in the foundational physics courses, there are right and wrong answers because it's literally computing Newton's equations and so on. But in the higher level courses, like say my quantum information courses, in the end, I do have more open-ended questions, which I ask them about, either addressing a paradox and then I mark them on the basis of their thought processes, and there is no right and wrong answer. The catch, of course, is that with a question like that, I can't rely on a tutor to mark it, right? Because I have to judge things personally. And I can only do so for a small class, like a class of 30 people.
Right.
I can't do this for a class of 200.
No,
if we wanted that sort of quality education, we would have to drastically reduce the class sizes. Currently, you can't possibly do that for a large class of like 200, 300 people. And when you have a large class of 200 and 300 people, it's not really that sort of universal dialogue, the traditional, cultivating feedback thought process. It just no longer happens. As Kavan says, it's not a good system for fostering this sort of stuff. But in the in the smaller, higher level classes, I do try to do that. It does take more work, but I think it's worth it for the higher level courses like quantum information.
Is there some way of scaling these kind of stuff?
I mean, we just have to hire more educators, I suppose. But
maybe.
But yeah.
Or have fewer students in college.
Yes, I'll have fewer students in college, which is another very controversial thing, right? Because currently there is this push for everyone to have a college education.
Precisely, yeah.
And
it's probably not necessary.
Yeah, it's being recorded.
No, I mean, like, the kids that we met the other night, they were extremely interested and smart. They don't need to go to college.
Absolutely.
They're genuinely good people that are.
I think this culture that everyone should go to college is a bit of a mistake. College is not suited for everyone. And there are very fulfilling things that people can do and very good opportunities that people should have.
Waste of time for most people, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, have you heard of this kind of concept called a life shift? Many of the developed country is now undergoing this, the longevity of longer than 80 years old, right?
Yeah.
And then it's probably continue to, increase up to some certain, period, like 120 years old or so, from human genetics and brain structures. But if you really think about this, this is kind of, huge, this requires a huge shift in planning of the life, right?
Yeah.
Like once you retire at age 60 or so, what do you do for the rest of the at least 20 years? If you think about this way, and many of the jobs start to become more intellect or creativity focused, then having some kind of experience in one domain and then doing something different is going to be more popular probably. And when you are trying to do that, if college education becomes
well, this is a lot of the stuff about continuing education, right?
Yeah, it's also related.
But unfortunately, the initiatives so far don't seem to work that well. I don't know. Yeah, um, it might be able to be put in a way that works.
Yeah,
but
about this, but continuous education thing, I also have a different perspective than you to some extent. One is that knowledge itself or experience of learning itself is fulfilling, probably especially when you become really old. I recently met with a person, over the internet, who kind of stopped, growing or learning after graduating from university, right? That happens. We as a
I
scientist.
feel like I've stopped learning after.
Maybe if you do too much, administration and grant writing, it does. But
Yes.
like doing the grant writing workshop like Kavan does, or research directorship, it's a learning experience, right? And then you do grow in different domains.
Yes, in different domains. I'm sure I've learned stuff, but
Yeah.
not necessarily in a domain that I
Yeah.
really want to learn stuff about.
Right. But anyway, what I wanted to say was that this kind of educational opportunity, like YouTube videos of not like just a fun kind of thing, but sometimes this kind of long podcast of us neuroscientists and also physicists talking. This is potentially inspiring and interesting, just from the intellectual point of view.
That's
potential.
I agree.
So I've really enjoyed listening to many of those, mostly because, and maybe it's not that I've learned. Sometimes I haven't learned anything, right? But sometimes when you watch somebody who's very well known in an area and you hear their broad stroke perspective, and you realize that, well, okay, I sort of understand that. I don't see anything further than that. So that is knowledge in itself, right? You say, okay, so maybe I'm not as naive as I think I am on this topic, and maybe there is some progress to be made. I mean, in a way, like I don't know if this is true, but I find that every time I hear somebody talk about the hard part of consciousness, whether it's Dave Chalmers or Frank Wilczek or Roger Penrose, they all seem to be stuck at that same exact point, that everyone else is stuck at that. So it's such a fundamental problem that, and that's interesting to me, that it's not that there is some deep understanding. Like quantum mechanics, you can get some technical stuff that you can understand, right? But this is a much more sort of basic problem that we're really stuck at, which is really amazing to me. But what kind of continuing learning do you have in mind? I mean, I think the problem with continuing learning that is imposed by our neoliberal overlords is that
it's retraining for jobs.
It's some sort of retraining or making you
But I think
better
this is
drones.
I think this is the main issue for entirety of education, not even just continuing education, just education itself.
Yeah.
That universities were originally supposed to be bastions of thinking and knowledge and questioning and understanding deep problems, but they have been turned into glorified training, employment training centers to offset the costs of companies in training future employees, or as Kavan puts it, drones. In actuality, what has happened is that society is paying for the cost of what traditionally companies did to train their employees. Whereas education itself, the primary role of universities, as they have been in the past, was they're not for the majority of society, but their purpose was to nurture independent thought and questioning and thinking of the big ideas. And a lot of that, I feel, is now certainly almost completely gone from undergraduate, and it's beginning to wane away from the graduate and the PhD programs as well. That a lot of places, the PhDs are now, they want them to be industry aligned and so on. And this is a perversion of what the universities originally began as. And in a way, I understand that we do want to prepare people for the knowledge economy, and that there are a lot more stuff to learn before people can have jobs. But I think one should separate these things out. There should be sort of there should be clear sort of institutions for training these things, and also places which are more for thinking more deeply about the questions.
Yeah. So the way I see it is that the world is changing, right, in many ways. And I, unlike you guys, potentially, I see huge potential in continuing education and also, interdisciplinary education as well. The reason is that, like we talked about this, failed or, not functioning leadership training or, organizational kind of, staff and administrative structure of the university and many things, and also industry, science, relationships. But to me, surprisingly, I didn't also pay much attention to this kind of stuff over the last 20 years. But during the lockdown, I started to pay attention to these psychological studies and also social science studies that were done properly, especially over the last 20, 30 years, using this randomized control experiment and also causality intervention kind of analysis and so on. And then many things actually started to become clear that, understanding the human nature and also the nature of the relationship, some things actually works or something doesn't work. Like, student evaluation of the teaching unit, situ thing. And I found that it's really fascinating, but, it turned out that if you try to correlate what the student evaluate about the course and the actual learning outcome in terms of that degree that they learn things, or
inversely correlated?
Inversely correlated slightly or no correlation at all.
I can see how there's no correlation.
Yeah, that's partly because the evaluation, subjective evaluation about the course, has something to do with the difficulty in learning or changing yourself, which involves pain, right? To some extent.
When I challenge students, I know that there will be a price to pay in my teaching evaluations.
Right.
I still challenge them anyway at times, but one has to moderate that, right? Because, I guess it also depends on how these. If they just have rate this course,
promotion year or not promotion.
Yeah.
And also, I think the student questionnaires can be improved. Like when sort of the questions are more like, did you find that this course challenging, or did this course challenge you? That should be, for example, a question evaluation.
Yeah, you're right.
And then this is one thing that I do like about NTU. We have questions like this, which does help in that when the student evaluates, they have to say, yeah, this course has really challenged me to think hard about these concepts. But if you just have a very generic one, like, did you like this course?
Yeah.
1 to 5.
How satisfied are you with this course?
Yeah, how satisfied.
What does that mean?
Yeah, then you get really crap inversely correlated feedback. But
Yeah.
I think student feedback is useful. One just has to prime the questions, proper fashion. Like you can ask stuff like, did this challenge you? Did you get introduced to new ideas that you were not familiar with? Right. These are the things that you can prime students.
Yeah. So what I wanted to say was that, that this kind of thing was properly analyzed and also properly theorized over the last 20 years of social science in some domain.
Yeah.
And educational psychology has made quite a good progress in that sense. And so some universities, some of the educational domain has made a huge progress on that, but it's not widely accepted or implemented, right? And worst thing is like leadership program. That the one that I read was that it's all about evaluation of satisfaction about the course itself. It's never the case that how this leadership program actually affected on the well-being of the employee or productivity of the group or anything like that. And
that's harder to measure, right?
Yeah,
so
but you can measure once you know what to measure or what to sort of optimize and so on. So what I'm trying to say is, coming back to where we were.
Yeah.
Some kind of interdisciplinary thinking will give us a much huge margin to improve in many different ways.
I agree. I think there should be more dialogue and more exposure for everyone to new ideas. And I believe this sort of continuing education is extremely valuable. I'm just not sure about the sort of targeted job approach, to say, okay, we're currently, machine learning is hot.
Yeah.
So you from this the who been working on whatever this tourism now move directly to programming artificial
Yeah,
intelligence.
that's really ridiculous.
It doesn't work that way. And it's very hard because I mean once it's there's a lot of training and you're naturally behind in the job application. People currently, you look at companies, they hire young people, partially because, the young people can work 80 hours a week with less complaints than someone who has a family. So when someone's 40, they do continuing education, they get a degree, and it's very hard for them to compete against people, in their 20s. And companies are just ageist in their hiring. So there's an entire society of infrastructure change. The other thing is, I feel educating people targeted towards specific skills is dangerous because skills, like specific trade type skills, like using a particular software package, which is often what they do in sort of these, practical machine learning courses, they go out of date.
Yeah.
Like these tools change every 5 years.
Yeah.
And often the education courses don't.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to be taught out of date skills like this.
Right.
And sort of universities trying to build courses targeting on what jobs are hot right now often miss a mark by 3 or 4 years. I mean, they go, oh, machine learning is really hot right now using this particular PyTorch package. Let's start a program on that. 5 years later, we get our first graduates. By then, the industry has moved on.
Yeah.
And so it's universities really should be teaching people about the fundamentals, the ideas that allow them to learn these things. It's really university is not a good place to teach these very concrete skills in industry that can change on an annual basis. That's something that it's better taught in the companies themselves.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like I feel this underappreciated. Universities are gearing more and more towards specialist courses, which are no longer about teaching the fundamental concepts, the fundamental ideas, and more into, here's the specific skills that's needed at this moment 3 years ago. And I think that's a major issue with the current education system.
Yeah, but maybe from a slightly different kind of perspective, I think company-centric view or skill-centric view is going to be replaced. At least it is being replaced by more like creativity-focused kind of view, right? Like the most successful or most famous youngsters right now is, for example, YouTubers or the guys who are founding some small company like Felix and so on, with a very small people but with a huge profit within it. And to do that, what they need is not really like specific skills, because skills of the Python programming or whatever is everywhere.
Yeah.
But what this each of the company that is successful distinguish themselves is like unique experience or unique combination of expertise with other groups of the people, or originality in viewpoint or perspective about the world, or expertise in different things and so on. And then persistency to take the unique and potentially very difficult kind of path. And those are the things I agree is not really taught in the university right now.
It's I'm not even sure if these are things that can really be taught. I mean, I agree they're extremely important, but a lot of what you're describing, these are almost innate skills that it's very difficult to teach someone. Do you think that one can teach someone
I think
directly
so.
to?
Like for example, one of the things that you said, like the paradox, or the writing and also thinking about these issues, or learning philosophy has been actually proven, if I remember correctly, proven to be correlated with this kind of creative jobs or critical thinking and so on. And the part of the thing I think is that these.
But do you think it's creative thinkers naturally linked towards philosophy, or philosophers become naturally more creative?
Yeah, so that kind of causal link is very difficult to make right now.
I feel it could be, because I mean, I think yeah, I'm not going to recommend anyone to do a philosophy degree to improve to increase their chances of becoming a CEO, for example.
Yeah, but maybe
Uh,
one thing I can tell you from reading of this psychology or sort of social psychology literature is that innate talent on, let's say, manipulating equation and number sense and things like that is also or IQ, more specifically working memory related IQ tend to be very difficult to change through training. But what is potential possible to change is this ability of the critical thinking. That is known to be actually trainable.
Okay, right.
And,
That's helpful.
I think,
Do we train?
I mean, like a philosophy or that kind of paradox thinking is a critical thinking.
I'm not so convinced. I think that might be more of a problem than a solution. You think about all these idiots running the universities.
Are you fine? We'll continue.
I mean, they know who they are.
All right.
Not all of them are idiots, so hopefully they know who they are.
We can stop as well.
I know it's fine. I don't
All right.
I'm not naming anyone, so
Right.
it is what it is.
Yeah.
I think this is universally agreed that
Right.
senior administrators are out of touch,
Right.
but they tend to think that they are creative. They tend to think that they're philosophically minded, and they tend to think that they're doing genuinely a good job, but they're not. They're often, and I'm not saying that the problems are easy. I think they're often focused on the wrong things, and I think what you're saying is that we can empower students to be more broad-minded. I think, yeah, maybe, definitely, that we can definitely do that, but potentially we just create more broad-minded administrators and create a bigger problem than people who are sort of able to find meaning in small ways. I mean, I think one of the problems.
So wait. So just to clarify, so you're saying that narrow-minded, focused people are better at the administrative job?
No, that's not what
level?
I'm saying. I'm saying that people who think that they're broad-minded and philosophically guided are bad
As a manager, administrator.
But they think they're good. They can reason their way out of it. I think what academics tend to be bad at is finding some level of happiness or meaningful meaning in small, narrow things, right? Academics tend to aim for big things, and this is what leads universities into bad state. I'm not saying that I'd be a good administrator. I'd probably be terrible at it.
No, a lot of the best brilliant scientists would be terrible administrators, mainly because they don't want to think about these problems, right? They don't want to manage.
But I actually disagree with that, because one thing I'm reading is this leadership BS book, and they clearly actually demonstrate that we are not educated in terms of leadership.
Yeah.
First of all, right? And so leadership science has been almost no founding so far, but there are really scarce kind of scientific data and evidence. What kind of thing actually promotes this and what kind of things are not. But the leadership industry is all about this self-evaluation thing. So what we learn from this program is completely bullshit, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
But what we know so far is that up around this associate professor level, we have seen what works and what doesn't, right?
Yes.
Right.
So to some extent, we have an insider knowledge of what works and what doesn't.
Yes.
And,
So in that sense,
combining this with the actual scientific knowledge of the leadership, probably we can do much better.
Oh, that I don't disagree with. I think that a lot of us can probably manage. Yes, with I mean, one of the big issues currently in a lot of areas is that the administrators are unfamiliar with, because they move around in the administration camp, but without familiarity of the actual domain.
Yeah.
And especially education functions very differently from a private company, and we see a lot more merging in the administration.
That's right.
Of
I mean, a lot of these
academic.
folks are running the university as if it's a business.
Yes, and that can have adverse consequences. The issue, I think, though, is that a lot of very people who could be very good administrators, very good managers, they don't want to be because they prefer to be doing whatever they're doing.
Yeah, but by the way, about the manager or the lab head, I also recently read this very interesting book called Progress Principle. Have you heard of this? So what this book is about is that they analyzed many companies employees diaries and also actual performance over the years, 10 years, more than 12,000 of the diaries. And then what they identified is that what matters and what manager can do for the employees promoting the progress. And the promoting progress mainly consists of removing the barrier to make progress, which means that it's not like manager is expected to manage people. It's more like removing the difficulty that they have, right?
But
so
I think
that changes quite a bit of the all these supervision and supervision of the students.
I completely agree.
I completely agree with that.
So,
right?
so if I think about the departments at Monash that I like versus the ones that I don't like,
Right.
there's a very clear distinction, right? The ones that I like are when I call them, they help me solve my problem.
Yeah, exactly.
The ones that I don't like are the ones when I call them, they read me policy, right? They say that here are the rules. Go fuck yourself.
Fine. All right.
YouTube is fine with
Yeah.
it. But I mean, and this is not just Monash, right? This is true for any organization. If anyone genuinely tries to help you,
I have to take this call because I have a meeting at 5.
Yeah,
oh,
that's fine.
sorry, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just going to park myself.
Yeah.
somewhere else a little bit,
Maybe then let's just speak until the end.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna say that I think the organization, when they genuinely try to help solve your problem, you don't think, you don't tend to dislike them because if somebody genuinely tries to help, then that's great. It is what it is. But a lot of our structure, a lot of the organizations, their leadership are designed to put rules in front of you, not solutions.
Yeah. So instead of this management, which is recommended and also works really well.
Yeah.
Which is to remove this obstruct and distraction program. What works really adversely, which shouldn't be something that you should do, is to impose goal or asking people to do this and so on, right? That's the worst thing that manager can do. But that's the opposite. That's the one that we don't like. We know.
Yes.
So something as simple as this, I think we can just make this university as well as laboratory management and everything to work at least better than currently it is. It might actually create more problem by doing this, but just spreading this kind of knowledge, it's going to probably make a huge difference, I think.
I think that the cultural change that we need is we need people running the university with the mindset that they are there to lift people who are trying to solve the big problems.
Maybe, but the reason why I tend to be more optimistic than you guys are, that in general, I think overall the world is getting better. If you read this, the book Factfulness, there is a reason. It explains why we tend to focus on negative kind of information and so on, which is evolutionary, understandable. We tend to pay attention to these kind of things. But overall, if you really look at the statistics of many things, the world has been improving. Like, in terms of education and so on, compared to 100 years ago, 200 years ago, I think it is getting better. And currently, university education is probably not really working well, but combined with all these, current technology, like, we talked about YouTube and the Japanese students, English level, like, because of the YouTube, it's becoming much better, right?
But
Something like
I
this
mean,
is gonna, yeah.
I've heard this argument, and I'm not always convinced by it, because the metrics chosen for better are the ones that our neoliberal overlords would like. So things like more people are educated. Well, that's because the rich who control all the companies need more people to read and write so that you can do the work that they have to, right? There's less need for just manual labor. Any pure manual labor job in modern world requires you to be able to read and write. So I agree, world is getting better, but that's not necessarily because it partly it's because we as people as collective have been fighting for it, but part of it is because some of these things that are defined, that are used as metrics for getting better are cleverly chosen.
Yeah, that's true. Like, something, what do you measure may determine what you want to optimize, and depending on what you measure, it's quite dangerous. That it may be sometimes better than not to measure things, right? Like, in the case of the leadership training, like self-evaluation, that's that makes this leadership training really worse. So yeah, okay, maybe should we take a break and then
let's take a break.
Yeah, I think, but this segment was also quite good.